Somewhere, before the man even knows he is finished, the ground is already open. That is how the oldest rule in this world works. You talk, and the earth is turned for you before you ever feel it coming. The Mafia does not forget a rat. It never has. That rule is older than any of the families who live by it, and for the better part of a century, it did exactly what it promised. Ask Dominick Napolitano. In August of 1981, inside a social club in Brooklyn, the man the movies would later call Sonny Black handed over his watch and his rings and asked someone to take care of his pigeons. Then he walked down a flight of stairs, and he did not come back up. Napolitano had not informed anyone. He had only trusted the wrong man, an FBI agent named Joseph Pistone, and vouched for him to the wrong people. That was enough. The code does not require that you inform. It only requires that you cost the family something, and Napolitano had cost them a bloodline of secrets. So the code came for him, the way it always comes. Now here is the arithmetic that should not add up. Every single person I am about to name talked. Some of them testified in open court. Some wore a wire. Some carried the word rat stitched to their names for the rest of their lives. By the oldest law in their world, all of them should be in the ground the code turns for men like them. And every one of them is alive right now, in 2026, as you sit here watching this. 8 of them, living in Phoenix, in Florida, in Germany, under their own names or new ones, and a few of them are running podcasts about the very life that was supposed to bury them. The Mafia never forgets a rat. So why are these 8 still breathing? This is not a story about loyalty. It is a story about arithmetic. Because every name on this list did the same thing, in the same cornered moment, alone. Each of them looked at 2 doors and did the math on their own life. So start with the man who did that math better than anyone before him and lived to brag about it. On screen, in the 2018 film Gotti, Salvatore Gravano is the knife in the back. William DeMeo plays him as the underboss who sold his own boss for a softer sentence. And for once, the movie actually undersells the real thing. Because the real Sammy the Bull did not trade one man. He traded an entire way of life, and the price he was allowed to pay for it is the reason every prosecutor in America learned his name. Gravano was the underboss of the Gambino crime family, John Gotti's second-in-command, the man who stood beside him through 3 separate trials the government could not win. Then, in 1991, sitting in a cell and listening to Gotti on a federal wire run his mouth about him behind his back, Gravano did the arithmetic. He flipped. In 1992, he took the stand and testified against the most famous mobster in the country, and he did it as the highest-ranking Mafia defector anyone had ever put in a witness chair. This is what he carried to that stand. By his own admission, Salvatore Gravano was involved in 19 murders. Peter Maas laid the whole ledger out in the book Underboss, drawn straight from Gravano's own account. And this is what those 19 murders bought him. A federal judge sentenced him to 5 years. He had already served about 4. Larry McShane of the Mob Museum called it exactly what it was, a sweetheart deal. So do the subtraction yourself. A lifetime of homicide, and the man walked out owing the government less than a single year. So why is he still alive? Because the machine that was supposed to kill him is the same machine he took apart from the witness box. His testimony helped convict John Gotti, who went into a federal prison and died there in 2002. The Gambino leadership that would have ordered Gravano into a basement was busy sitting in basements and cells of its own. There was nobody left standing with the authority to collect, and Gravano understood that better than anyone. He walked out of witness protection entirely. In 2000, the government arrested him again in Arizona, not for anything the mob did to him, but for running an ecstasy ring of his very own. He served close to 2 decades for that and came home around 2017. Today, Salvatore Gravano lives in the Phoenix area, out in the open, under his own name, running a YouTube channel and a podcast about the life. The most consequential informant in the history of the American Mafia gives interviews for a living now, and nobody has laid a finger on him. Gravano, at least, was one of them. He broke a code he had actually sworn. The next man on this list broke nothing at all, because he was never bound by it in the first place. He was never a gangster. He was the reason a gangster like Napolitano ended up on those basement stairs. In the 1997 film Donnie Brasco, Johnny Depp is a jewel thief slowly swallowed by the family he has been sent to destroy, and Al Pacino is Lefty, the aging soldier who vouches for him and comes to love him like a son. Those performances are real. The bond, by nearly every account, was real too. What the film quietly softens is the arithmetic sitting underneath it, which is that Joseph Pistone was an FBI agent, and every handshake in that movie was a countdown to a body. Pistone went under in 1976. For roughly 6 years, he lived as Donnie Brasco, an associate inside the Bonanno crime family, and he got close enough that Dominick Napolitano personally vouched for him. When the Bureau finally pulled Pistone back out in 1981, his work produced more than 200 indictments and over 100 convictions. It also produced a humiliation the families could not answer with the code, because the man who had gutted them was not one of them to punish. They tried anyway. Word came down that there was a contract on Pistone, a bounty the man himself has put at $500,000, a standing open order for his death. Most people never heard what became of that order. According to Pistone, the Mafia Commission itself, the ruling council of the 5 families eventually called the contract off. Not out of mercy, out of math. Killing a sworn agent of the federal government does not settle a score. It invites a war the families knew they could not survive. So Joseph Pistone lived. He is 86 years old now, still careful, still surfacing every so often to tell the story, most recently on a podcast in 2025. He believes the bounty was never truly canceled down at street level, only at the top. He has spent more than 40 years alive on a loophole in the very code that was designed to kill men exactly like him. And the reason is simple enough to say in one line. You cannot punish a rat who was never in the nest. Hold on to that idea, because it comes back before the end. Not everyone on this list is a rat. A few of them are people the label got thrown at and never actually fit. Watch for them. Pistone got to choose his door before the story even started. He was the law, playing a criminal. But every other name on this list faced that choice for real, cornered, with the clock running down. And that choice is the entire engine of this life. So let me put it straight to you. Every person who flips faces the same 2 doors, and only ever 2. Behind one is a cell, and you die inside it, old and forgotten, decades from now. Behind the other is a microphone, a stack of names you have to hand over, and a new life in a town you have never seen, where you can never speak your own name out loud again. No loyalty option, no secret third door, just the cell or the microphone. Standing exactly where they stood, which one do you walk through? Tell me in the comments, because I promise the honest answer is harder than it sounds. And if you are new to this channel, I pull these cases straight out of trial transcripts and federal files every week. So subscribe and stick around. Because the next man on the list did not pick his door to save his own skin. He picked it to bring down the dictator of an entire country. Enter Carlos Lehder. he does not belong to any of the 5 families. He belonged to something younger and, for a few years, richer than all of them put together. Lehder was a co-founder of the Medellin operation that flooded the United States with cocaine across the late 1970s and early 1980s. He built a private airstrip on an island in the Bahamas called Norman's Cay, 210 miles off the coast of Florida, and he ran it like a toll booth for smugglers. Court papers later put his income in the early 1980s at $250 to $300 million a year. This is the part the films leave tangled. In the movie Blow, the Lehder figure is not even called Lehder. He is renamed Diego Delgado, played by Jordi Mola, the flashy partner who helps George Jung move his product and then betrays him. That is Hollywood's version, and it runs backward. Because in the real courtroom, when the United States finally put Lehder on trial in 1988, one of the men who testified against him was George Jung himself, the very partner that Blow would later recast as the wounded victim. Then the file changed. Lehder was convicted and buried under a sentence of life plus 135 years. A man does not come back from a number like that. Except he did. Because Carlos Lehder had one card still in his hand, and he played it. In 1991, he testified for the United States government against Manuel Noriega, the dictator of Panama. In exchange for that cooperation, his sentence of life plus 135 years was cut down to 55. So why is a co-founder of the most violent cocaine empire of its era still alive today, at around 76, a free man deported to Germany, briefly arrested in Colombia in 2025 and let go within days? 2 reasons. First, before he testified, Lehder reportedly asked Pablo Escobar himself for permission to talk, and Escobar, for his own cold reasons, allowed it. Second, by the time any of it mattered, there was almost nobody left alive to come for him. Lehder spent 33 years locked inside American custody. Across those same years, Escobar was shot dead on a rooftop in Medellin, and the other founders of the empire were killed or captured one by one. Everything was in place to erase Carlos Lehder. The men who were supposed to do the erasing simply did not live long enough to get to him. There is a particular kind of man in this life who talks and lives, not because he outsmarted the code, but because the whole world that enforced it had already burned down around him before he opened his mouth. Kevin Weeks is that man. South Boston, the winter of 1999. Kevin Weeks had spent years as the right hand to James Bulger, the man Boston knew as Whitey, the boss of the Winter Hill operation that ran the Irish underworld of that city. Not the Italian Mafia, a different machine entirely, but with the same one law at its center. You do not talk. Then the federal government handed Weeks a 29-count racketeering indictment, and Weeks learned the thing that broke the whole world open. Whitey Bulger, the man he had killed for, the man who preached the code loudest, had been a secret FBI informant for years. The boss was the rat. So Weeks did the arithmetic, and in the year 2000, he became a cooperating witness himself. He said it plainest in his own book, the memoir he titled Brutal. I pled guilty to 29 counts, including 5 murders. I went away for 5.5 years. 5.5 years for 5 killings. His cooperation helped the government recover the bodies of victims buried around the city, and it helped convict the corrupt FBI agent, John Connolly, who had protected Bulger all along. And this is the man who, when Hollywood came calling, looked at the 2015 film Black Mass, the one where Johnny Depp plays Bulger and Jesse Plemons plays Weeks himself sitting in the confession chair, and called the whole thing a fantasy. We really did kill those people, Weeks said. But the movie is a fantasy. The film even hands his character the line that became his signature denial, spoken to the men across the interrogation table. "I'm not a rat. So why is Kevin Weeks, admitted party to 5 murders, alive and living openly around Boston today at 70 years old, having refused witness protection outright? Because there was no one left to send. By the time Weeks flipped, Whitey Bulger had already vanished, a fugitive on the run since the mid-1990s after a crooked agent tipped him off. Stephen Flemmi, Bulger's partner, was already sitting in a cell. Another top enforcer, John Martirano, had already turned. The crew that would have collected the debt was scattered, jailed, or gone. Weeks did not beat the code. He simply outlived the men who carried it. That is 3 so far, and notice the pattern beginning to form under them. Every one of these men is alive not because the rule got soft, but because the family behind the rule fell first. Keep that in your mind. Now, the man who ran an entire New Jersey family, and whose face you have arguably already seen 100 times without ever knowing his name. If you have watched The Sopranos, you have watched a version of Vincent Palermo, the man they called Vinny Ocean. He is one of the real figures most often cited as an inspiration for Tony Soprano, the suburban New Jersey boss juggling a crumbling family business and a real family in the same breath. Palermo was the de facto boss of the DeCavalcante crime family, the North Jersey outfit that always lived in the shadow of the New York Five, and by the late 1990s, he was running it. Then, in 1999, the arithmetic arrived for him too. A sweeping federal indictment landed, the kind that comes with the rest of your life attached to it. And Vincent Palermo, boss of a family, did the thing bosses are never supposed to do. He flipped. He admitted his own involvement in multiple murders, including the 1989 killing of a Staten Island developer named Fred Weiss, a hit that had been requested because the family feared Weiss himself was about to cooperate. Sit with that irony for a moment. Palermo helped kill a man over the fear that the man might talk, and then Palermo talked. His cooperation put dozens of his own people in prison. So why is Vinny Ocean still alive today, at 81? 2 reasons that should sound familiar by now. He walked into witness protection, and he walked in a wealthy man. And the family he left behind, the DeCavalcantes, collapsed inward as more of his own crew followed him through the same door. There was no throne left to order his death from. The boss cooperated, and the kingdom dissolved behind him. That is not a retirement plan. That is an evacuation. Every name so far has been a person who did something and lived. Now I have to give you the counter note, the one the title's own premise gets wrong, because honesty is the whole product here. Because at least one name that ends up on lists like this one never talked at all. Her name is Mirtha Jung. If you know her from the 2001 film Blow, where Penelope Cruz plays her as the volatile, glittering wife of the cocaine smuggler George Jung, the couple burning through a fortune and each other. And that is very nearly all that most people know, because the real Mirtha Jung did something almost no one else in this entire story managed. She disappeared into an ordinary life. Here is the record, stated as plainly as the record allows. There's no evidence that Mirtha Jung ever cooperated with law enforcement, ever testified against anyone, ever informed. She was arrested on drug charges. She served roughly 3 years. She was released around 1981, divorced George Jung a few years later, got clean, and walked away from all of it. She is alive today, in her early 70s, living a life so private that the loudest thing about it is how quiet it is. So why is she still alive? Because there was never anything to punish. You cannot enforce a code of silence against a woman who simply stayed silent, served her time, and left. She is on a rat's list she was never a member of. And if you want the real weight of this entire subject, it might sit right here, in the least dramatic story of the 8. The one who kept her mouth shut and asked for nothing, got the ending everyone else in this life claims they wanted, and almost none of them ever reach. A quiet one. Nobody came for her because she never gave the code a debt to collect. The next name gives you the opposite problem. Not a person the label missed, but a person the label has been thrown at for 20 years, and it has never once stuck in a courtroom. John Gotti, the son, Jr. On screen, he has been played more than once by Spencer LaFranco in the 2018 Gotti opposite John Travolta as his father, and the whole Gotti saga was dramatized back in 1996 with Armand Assante as the elder Gotti. Jr. inherited the most famous name in the American underworld and the street leadership of the Gambino family in the 1990s, and then he inherited the full weight of the federal government trying to end him. And here, the record demands real care because John Gotti Jr. is alive, and the central accusation about him is disputed. He pleaded guilty to racketeering in 1999. Then, between 2005 and 2009, the government took him to trial 4 separate times on racketeering charges, and 4 separate times it ended in a mistrial. Eventually, the prosecutors simply walked away. The claim that Gotti Jr. cooperated, that he gave the government a proffer, comes chiefly from a former associate turned witness named John Elite, and Gotti has denied it flatly and furiously every time it has been raised. So I'm not going to hand you a verdict the courts themselves never reached. What I can tell you is the allegation exists, the denial is absolute, and no jury ever convicted him of anything across those 4 trials. So why is Junior Gotti alive? Follow the fork. If he never cooperated, then there is no broken code to punish, only a man who beat the government to a standstill and quit. And if the accusation were true, then it would not matter anyway, because the family that might once have answered it was already hollowed out, its father dead in prison, its power broken. Either way, the arithmetic points the same direction. There was no machine left with the reach to touch him. Which brings us to the last name. And the last name is the strangest of all, because he may be the one man on this entire list who genuinely kept the code and got branded for the opposite anyway. Joseph Merlino, Skinny Joey. On paper, he is the reputed boss of the Philadelphia family going back to the 1990s, and Netflix put him at the center of its series Mob War, about Philadelphia's long war with itself. His name lands on rat lists with a certain regularity, and it is, by the actual record, almost exactly backward. Because Joey Merlino is famous for the one thing none of the others managed. He did not flip. When the government finally convicted him around 2001, it did so not on his own words but on the testimony of the men who turned on him, chiefly a former boss named Ralph Natale, who became the highest-ranking American mob figure of his time to cooperate, and later an informant who wore a wire named John Rubeo. Merlino was not the rat in his own story. He was the target of every rat around him. There are recordings of Merlino himself worrying aloud about who among his people were the stool pigeons. Any suggestion that Merlino informed is disputed, and it stays labeled as disputed because the weight of the record runs the other way. So why is Joey Merlino still alive at 64, living in Boca Raton, running a restaurant and a podcast? Not because he broke the code and slipped the noose, because he did not break it, and there was no one left with the standing to reward him or punish him either way. He served his years, he came home, and the Philadelphia family that surrounded him had been carved apart by other men's cooperation. not his. The last name on a list of rats is the one man on it who beat the word. So line them all up now, all 8, and ask the question the title asked one more time. The Mafia never forgets a rat. So why are these 8 still here? Here is what actually happened according to the record itself, and it is not what the myth wants you to believe. The code did not fail. Look closely and you will see it never softened, not once. It did exactly what it always did. It just needs a family standing behind it to collect the debt. And one by one, for every single name on this list, that family was already gone. Gravano gutted the Gambinos from the witness chair, and then Gotti flipped, and the ledger went with them. Weeks flipped into a winter hill that had already scattered to the wind. Palermo cooperated, and the De Cavalcante throne dissolved behind him. Lehder outlived Escobar and an entire dead empire. Junior Gotti outlasted a broken family and 4 exhausted juries, and the rest were never rats at all. Pistone was a federal agent the code could never legally touch. Mirtha Jung never said a word to anyone. Joey Merlino kept the very silence he gets accused of breaking. People thought the code had gone soft on all of them. They were wrong. The truth is colder than that. Every one of these 8 is alive for the same single reason, and here it is. The machine that was built to kill them died first. The grave that the oldest rule in their world turns for men who talk, the one that was open before Napolitano ever walked down those stairs, that grave still gets dug. It always gets dug. It is just that for these 8, there was no one left standing at the top of it to fill it back in. And so they remain in Phoenix and Boca Raton and a quiet house in Germany, above the ground that was turned for them, telling their side, while the men who were supposed to bury them are the ones underneath.